Hey, what's up? My name is Michael Riscica. I'm from YoungArchitect.com. I put out a video last week regarding the situation with NCARB and Prometric and the whole coronavirus situation. So I put that video out on June 4th, and today is what, June 9th, and a lot of stuff has happened. And I wanted to make a follow-up video from the first one and really update people with what is happening. So just to make sure I got my facts straight, I have notes in front of me. I got a set of notes. I'm going to run through my notes and talk about it. Just like my last video, I would say I'm not going to use anyone's names. I didn't, Young Architect's got a big following, and I'm not trying to destroy people's careers. So instead of using people's real names, I'm just going to refer to them as NCARB or whatever organization they're a part of. And if you haven't watched the first video, go watch it because I'm not going to recap what was discussed in that video. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about. All right, so let's get started with talking about the timeline. That's how I did the other video. Let's talk about what's happened because a lot of stuff has unfolded in the past, what is it, 5 days? And I want to talk about, the events that have taken place. And at the end of this video, I have some opinions. I'll give you guys my opinions. I have a little bit of advice about how do we use this information and move forward. All right, so timeline. I would say on Thursday, June 4th, I published that video. And it was pretty up to date when I hit the publish button. And I hit publish, I ran to a doctor's appointment. And when I got back from the doctor's appointment, someone in the Facebook group posted, they said, hey, I was looking at the Prometrics website and they updated the list and NCARB is on it. And everyone was like, yes, finally, we make the list. At this point, NCARB hadn't made an announcement yet. I said, this is good news, but I said, I'll be honest, I'm not celebrating until we're back to testing and exams stop getting canceled. Because there were still people were having problems with scheduling. It seemed to me that there was no availability anywhere across America. And so, yes, that comes out. A lot of people actually immediately started asking more questions on the NCARB community under my thread. I had a thread going. I talked about it in the last video about advocacy and regulation. NCARB finally puts out a statement. I think later that night, a couple hours later, they put out a statement. I'll be honest, their statement was, it was a lot of stuff we already knew, but there's a really good paragraph that's really all about this. Let's read it together. It says, ARE candidates are now classified as essential testers. In April, Prometric interpreted the CISA guidelines and designated ARE candidates as non-essential testers. NCARB has been advocating with Prometric to explain why ARE candidates should be designated as essential with the CISA guidelines. NCARB's efforts proved successful just yesterday, and ARE candidates have now been acknowledged as essential testers in the Prometric Test Center network. All right, so Prometric is in the process of updating their scheduler. Starting Tuesday, June 9th, which is actually today, you will be able to schedule an appointment at any test center offering all programs or essential only. So all of the centers are now available to the architect exam. Thank you, NCARB, for clarifying that and putting out an official statement. And that's exactly what I said all along. And I said in the last video, this was about the Prometrics program that had nothing to do with states or the boards or some bigger political thing regarding essential. After that statement comes out, it gets emailed to the candidates. It was posted on the community. What is interesting is I start getting messages from AIA people who I've been talking to. And they say that all the AIA executive directors at the chapters across America got a friendly letter from NCARB's CEO on letterhead. It's actually an 8-page letter. The first 2 pages is the letter from NCARB CEO. And the remaining 6 pages is stuff they copied and pasted from NCARB's website. What's interesting is the first 2 pages actually includes a significantly longer explanation than the paragraph that was given to the ARE candidates about the situation. I have a link in the description below. I just posted the PDF on my website, so you can take a look at that. Just read it yourself. So what ends up happening is after this letter goes out from NCARB's CEO, the AIAs just started sharing this email with people. And I think that made the situation worse. They just forwarded the letter off to all the people, all their associate members. I wouldn't say even all of the candidates as well. some AIAs, not all the AIAs. And so people actually started asking, why am I getting this information from the AIA and not NCARB? People, they said it looks like NCARB is using this as an opportunity to make themselves look good to the AIA. Who cares about you? The ARE candidates got a paragraph in an email from customer service, but it's the AIA executive directors. They got a 2-page letter from the CEO of NCARB on letterhead. And so people got upset. NCARB's image is always a priority over the ARE candidates. And I'd even add too, AIA executive directors aren't the ones paying NCARB's fees. And with no disrespect to the AIA, I'd also include many of them are not licensed architects or have ever worked with NCARB. They're executive directors of an organization. So that didn't go over well. I would say at this point, NCARB also starts responding to people in the community, but just like their webinar, they were refusing to answer the hard questions. People were pressuring them. Why weren't we added to this? Great news, but why not since the very beginning? We need out a part of this. What else happens? So, myself and other people in the community were starting to get frustrated. When NCARB published their statement, they actually shut down my thread, which was frustrating, about, advocacy and regulation. I talked about in the last video. They decided this conversation is done, where there's new information. And actually another person from the community who was having the dialogue said, this conversation was not done. Let's restart the thread. And we created a part 2 of that as well. And we're still talking in there. Shortly after that happens, I get a personal email from the director of examination asking if we could chat on Monday. So I guess this was on Friday. He wanted to follow up with one of my posts on the NCARB community. He couldn't follow up or respond because NCARB closed the freaking thread. He also felt it would be easier to do so on a phone call rather than broadcasting this conversation across the entire community. I agree. And I'll be honest with you, I wish NCARB reached out to me a little bit sooner. So I say, yeah, let's chat. I'd love to chat with you, actually. All right, so we have a meeting. Yesterday afternoon, I met with the director of examination at NCARB on Zoom, and we had a great chat. The first thing we talked about is he wanted to address my post, my original post, where I was going on and on and on about regulation and advocacy. He explained to me there's a situation happening that I would say I didn't really know about. I've heard little things, but I wasn't really aware of what was going on. I think it's important that you guys need to know. He said that there's a situation happening where some states are trying to deregulate the practice of architecture. And it's not just architecture, it's other professions as well. Some engineering or even, medical things. They're trying to deregulate architecture and say, you don't need licensed architects. This whole licensing thing is stupid. And with this situation, that situation that I wasn't really aware of, it said, state boards and NCARB need to be very careful about overstepping their boundaries as regulators and not to be, advocates. And what needs to happen is it's the AIA, it's you guys, it's the profession, it's the community. And I think this isn't just about the people that live in those states where this is happening. This is, I would say, the entire national architecture community, I think, needs to be involved with this. But the community really needs to step up and advocate for architecture to be, not deregulated. And what I thought was interesting, now after the conversation was over, I thought about it. I said, this is why. Remember in that New York webinar, they brought that conversation up around advocacy and regulation, and that's what sent me on down the rabbit hole talking about this. That's probably what was on their minds when they brought that up. So we talked about this for a little while, and I asked him, I said, how does this information, okay, I didn't know about this situation, but how does it play its role into what's going on right now with testing? And he said, we'll come back to this. So I'm going to talk about this again in a second. So let's talk about what's happening right now. Moving forward, we should be okay with getting back into the testing centers as originally planned months ago. I think there was a challenge, we overcame it. It should be, I use the word should, we should be okay. He explained to me that more tests will be canceled, big but, it's going to be about social distancing reasons. If a testing center has too many people scheduled that day, or there was a situation that happened, recently a testing center caught on fire or something like that. If there's a situation, or it's going to be about social distancing, where architect exam's not going to be the lowest priority. This is important. He told me to relay this message to you guys. If exams get canceled, do not immediately log in and buy a new seat credit and try to immediately reschedule. When you guys do that, it's causing problems for them on the back end. The system needs about 24 hours to reset itself and credit you back the seat credit. So my advice to you guys is to just be patient and wait. If your exams gets canceled, please don't buy a new seat credit, because it creates another series of events and it's taxing. It's making the process actually slower. If customer service or Prometric or someone doesn't contact you within 24 hours, reach out to them. He said that we didn't actually talk about this, but something that I think is going to happen, and I keep telling this to the community and in the boot camp and all the people, is when we get back to normal, people will be rescheduling. I know test date availability sucks. It sucks because of the situation, but I will guarantee you there are people that have exams scheduled far away, or they get a better test date somewhere else, so that suddenly that opens up. It's a moving target. If you're not happy with your test dates, keep checking to see if you can get a better date. And then another thing that happens, there's people that have a test next week and they're just not ready for it, or something happened and they have to reschedule, and now that availability opens up. So the best advice I have for everyone is to just keep checking and seeing if you can get a better test date. But it seems like we're making progress with that. He said that the month of June is it's tough. It's going to be a tough month for us to get through. He says that we're scheduled at 10% of what normal testing normally is. We've got 10% of normal capacity. July is significantly better. August even better than that. And we're, unless the coronavirus situation gets worse, we're on track to be getting back to normal actually very quickly. So just keep checking those test dates. I asked him straight out. I said, why didn't we get added to the Prometric Essential Client list? What happened? And he explained that Prometric didn't originally consider us as essential. And a bunch of time went by. And when Prometric announced that not all testing centers are going to be considered essential and we're only going to be available to use non-essential testing centers, that's when the thing went off and said, why not? That's when the larger conversation started. It was, and another thing that I think is important to know is NCARB said, it was a balancing act for them. They needed to delicately deal with the Prometric situation without undermining stuff that was happening with that other situation regarding the deregulation of architecture and stuff like that. And so I'll be honest with you, it was a miscommunication with NCARB and Prometric, and the ball got dropped. And NCARB is well aware that they effed up and all the problems it caused for you guys. We spent a lot of time talking about how NCARB could have handled the entire pandemic situation better. We talked about the poor communication. We talked about the webinar. They explained to me, they said, when we were doing that webinar, we weren't watching the chat. They were doing the webinar and answering the questions. And it was actually headquarters was monitoring the chat and feeding them the questions. And so after the webinar was over, they go, that went really good. What a great webinar, really good. And then people were like, whoa, dude, you should look at the chat. And they looked at the chat and go, oh my God, I like so much. And that was why they decided to create that post addressing a lot of the topics that were those two blog posts that with the stuff we were talking about in the chat. NCARB's learned a lot of lessons in this pandemic situation. We talked about 5.1. I think what's important, rumors are flying already about 5.1. I think what's important for you guys to realize is it's not a major change to the architect exam. It's architect exam still going to be 6 exams. The way you study for these exams isn't going to change. They're not moving any of the objectives or the content around. It's not a major change. The only thing that's going to change is how we take the exam. And that's when we started talking about remote proctoring. And with the context of remote proctoring, I would say, you're still going to be able to show up even when 5.1 and remote proctoring's been launched. They're not eliminating the testing centers. If you want to show up to a testing center and take an exam, that will still be an option. We talked a lot about remote proctoring and exam security, because that's I'm the biggest skeptic with exam security. There's a reason why security is so high on the architect exam, and I think it's important, and I think it dials back to the integrity of our profession. So he explained to me how it works. How does remote proctoring work? And he spent a lot of time explaining it to me. And I'll be honest with you, even after the explanation, I'm still a skeptic. I'm not convinced that remote proctoring is actually a viable option. And I'll be honest with you, I kind of wish NCARB wasn't working on this. No decisions have been made. And I'm not going to tell you about all the details he gave me, because they haven't even finalized. It seems like they're still in the preliminary phases of working on this. They're doing their due diligence. They're actually watching. When we talked about exam security, they told me that they're watching there's other professions that work with the health, safety, and welfare of the public, who are doing remote proctoring, and they're watching very closely to see how that goes for them. So I'll let NCARB give you more details about that. But I'll be honest with you, it sounds to me like you'll be done with your exams by the time they figure out remote proctoring. So don't hold your breath on that. They also told me what was interesting is there's this new, we talked about a bunch of other things. There's a new, what did I write here? I wrote, it's a shady, faceless new company is soliciting ARI candidates to try to help them create ARI exam content. It seems shady. From what they told me, it sounded shady. If some weird company reaches out to you, and they wanted to see if I knew anything about it. I hadn't heard anything. But if some weird company reaches out to you asking if they can hire you to help them, create ARI prep study materials that you've never heard of before, just contact NCARB. So there's that. I told NCARB my door is always open. If they ever want to talk to me, yes, I am one of their biggest critics. AIA as well. I would admit, deep down inside, I want them to succeed. I really want NCARB to succeed. I want the profession to succeed. I want the next generation to succeed. And having NCARB and the AIA succeeding is a big part of that from happening. You guys play a major role in that. And feel free to reach out to me anytime you want. My door is always open. After our conversation, I'll be honest with you guys, I genuinely think he's trying the best he can with the tools that he has. I always say that NCARB treats you guys like you're a robot, like you're a machine or a number. But we have to realize that they themselves are human too, and they make mistakes. And they are not good with their communications, so we just have to be patient. And that's probably my biggest advice for everyone, is just hang tight. We'll get through this. Let's be patient. And I think I said in another video, if this is the biggest problem in your life right now, that's great news. Let's be glad that these are the challenges we're dealing with, and we're here and we're healthy and we don't have coronavirus or whatever. So that was my conversation with NCARB. Shortly after that, a couple hours after that, there was some good news to report. Someone in the Facebook group posted this. It was actually a person from my ARI bootcamp posted that they took an exam this morning and they passed their test, and everyone freaked out and went bananas. And hallelujah. This guy, one of the guys, he lives in Boston. He actually drove all the way to Connecticut to take an exam. He had this exam. He kept watching and looking. He got it rescheduled, and he just hung on to his date. And he showed up, and he took a test yesterday, and he passed his PJM exam. Congratulations. This was the very first confirmed exam in 3 months of not testing. And I'll be honest, it took a weight off of my shoulders when I heard this guy tested today and he passed his exam. It was, hallelujah, we're making progress. So that's good news. And I wish I could end my video, this part 2 video series that I didn't want to make right here. But there's another situation that happened today with NCARB that I have to address it. We got to talk about it because we talked about it in the first video. So let's address this situation, and after we talk about that, I'll share with you guys my thoughts. I have some opinions and advice about moving forward, and I want to wrap up this video. I want to wrap up this series. I don't want to make another part 3. of this. All right, so what ended up happening, the situation was on Thursday, June 4th, a couple hours after, around the same time they put out that statement, hours after I put out my last video, NCARB put out a racism statement about currently America is protesting police brutality, George Floyd's systemic racism, but what the hell, it couldn't be a better time to put out a statement about racism. Two things jumped out at me that I want to talk about on that racism statement. The first is that board of directors, baby. In my last video, a lot of people got very upset when I mentioned NCARB's dirty little secret, which is the diversity of its board of directors. All right, so in NCARB's racism statement, this is what it said under the part of NCARB leadership. It says, in recent years, we have committed ourselves to encouraging greater diversity in our board of directors and our other volunteer leadership. We renew this commitment as we work to ensure that our leadership reflects the diverse communities we serve. And it triggered me. It triggered me, and I almost had a panic attack. I said, are you kidding me? Encouraging greater diversity in your board of directors? And I fired right back on Facebook, and I said, excuse me, your board of directors is not diverse, and I copied and pasted that statement in my comment. So I asked, what does encouraging greater diversity actually mean? Is that, the CEO sending an email to the board asking, for greater diversity? And a lot of other people fired back as well and started posting pictures of the NCARB board of directors. Okay, great, NCARB, let's talk about diversity here. A few hours later, NCARB revised their statement. Okay, so here's the new statement. NCARB leadership in recent years, NCARB members, leaders, and other volunteers committed ourselves to encouraging greater diversity in our volunteer community. We renew this commitment to work to ensure that our participants reflect the diverse communities we serve. Okay, so I'll be honest, I don't even like their new statement as much as I didn't like the old statement. It sounds like, if you want to volunteer for NCARB and work for free, then NCARB, wants to see diversity. But, and there's also a link in there. And if you click that link, it took me down a rabbit hole. I realized that in 2018, NCARB did put out a statement about diversity within all the people they're working with. Within that 2018 statement, I found another statement from 2015 from the NCARB board of directors. They created a policy for diversity, which I thought was pretty interesting. And if I'm not going to read the statement, but that's what they're referring to in NCARB's policy for diversity from 2015. It encourages diversity, and that's what they mean when they're encouraging diversity. But let's unpack this a little bit further, and I want to give NCARB actually a little bit of slack when it comes to this, and I'll be honest with them. The truth is, that there is some truth in their new statement. If you look at their website, NCARB never misses an opportunity to showcase diversity, and in any photograph of people. There are people of color in every single photograph all over their website. Yes, there is diversity in their volunteer groups, in the think tanks, and all in their own staff. But pay no attention to the people at the top who are making all the decisions. Please ignore the fact the NCARB board of directors is all white and male. I think you and I need to figure out, how do these people get this position? I don't know a lot about NCARB board of directors, but I don't know how it works, but I want to be a part of that process. I want to be a part of the process of the people who make the decisions, who sit on that board. Someone in the community made a joke that NCARB board of directors has a stronger diversity and representation in the decision to choose a bow tie versus a necktie than females or people of color on their board. Someone also commented in the community to my last video, and they made an important comment that I think needs to be addressed. They said, please don't criticize them because they are old white men. When you talk about diversity, please also consider age. They said, the world is changing at a rapid fire pace, and I worry that because the world has changed, this board will not understand and be able to relate or understand the challenges that I'm actively dealing with today at the beginning of my architecture career. So my last comment about the board of directors is I would love to see the people in these positions actively working hard to see themselves replaced and bring diversity to the board. You guys are the ones that made the policy for diversity. I'd love to encourage NCARB board of directors to find more diversities on their board. Guys, we get it. We get that most of you are FAIA and you've had successful architecture careers, but it's time to let some other people take a turn at doing this job. All right, the second thing I want to talk about in the racism statement was the survey that they mentioned. They mentioned doing a survey with partnering with NOMA, and it actually happened in March 2020. So back in March, early March, they sent an email out to all the people taking exams, people with records, and they asked you guys, they said, hey, did you know that the average white licensure candidate is 25% more likely to fall off the path to licensure than their white counterpart? Help us find out why. And a lot of people got upset. And they said, is, NCARB really asking me this? And what ended up happening was there was a handful of people that wrote really, emotional, strong responses. And they took screenshots and posted it on social media. But let me paraphrase what the general message, what a lot of people said was they said, yes, NCARB, it's you. You play a major role in the problem. That's why. And that was just the kind of the general consensus as to what a lot of people said in that survey. When that happened, it was actually it was a part of a series of surveys. It was before even that happened. There were multiple surveys that NCARB kept asking you questions about. What do you guys think about this? What do you think about this? And I kept saying, my opinion on the surveys is I say it's their let them eat cake moment. It's a way to get people to shut up and feel like you're contributing to the process, because I'll be honest with you, it doesn't seem like, you can fill out these surveys all day long. I'm not sure it really makes a difference. And so back when we were talking about the one that they did with NOMA, we were chatting about it in the group, and someone from the community had a really great statement that kind of stuck with me back then. And they said, I got a lot of experience working in government and working with the public and organizations. And what I've learned is that when a survey like something like this goes out, it's not because they're genuinely interested in hearing what you say. It's a lot of times they use these surveys as a tool to push some other kind of agenda. And, so that was in some ways that conversation we had in the community immediately popped up when I saw that they mentioned this survey in their statement about racism. But while we're at it, let's look at the numbers. What's NCARB talking about? Okay, so currently there's 115,000 licensed architects in America. 2,300 of those licensed architects are African American. That's 2%. And even less than 500 of them, of the 115,000 are African American women. That's 0.4% of all the licensed architects are African American women. Guys, these numbers are nauseating. This is not a NOMA problem. This is not an NCARB problem. This is the entire profession's problem. Why are these numbers so low? Why are people of color, so poorly represented by the licensed architects in America? I'll be honest with you. I get frustrated when NCARB asks you guys, what do you think the problem is? What could it be? What do you think? So kudos to everyone that fired back and said, we think it's you. I want someone else to do another survey, and I want NCARB not to be involved. And I want you to contact everyone who's ever worked with NCARB and ask if they think that there's, if the existing architectural licensing system is contributing to systemic racism. And my answer is absolutely. I think the entire system is broken. And with all the hurdles that you have to jump through and the lack of support and NCARB's poor communication, the chances for a minority of getting to that finish line is significantly less. It's, that's the problem right there. And so I'd love to see NCARB, take real action with helping to improve these numbers. And by taking real action, that means not just inviting the non-white community to volunteer for their volunteer efforts. How about NCARB stops charging, African American community fees or for their exams until these numbers start to improve? And like I said earlier, this isn't an NCARB problem. It's not 100% their fault. This is the entire profession's fault. And collectively, together as a community, we need to be working to make these numbers better. All right, so that's pretty much my update on the timeline. I want to wrap this video up. I got some advice and some opinions and thoughts I want to share with you guys. First thing is, I would say for everyone working with NCARB at whatever capacity, keep records of any time you have to deal with them or customer service. It is your responsibility to document what is happening and what took place. When I did my exams, I had a problem with it was called IDP back then. It's AXP now. There was a big problem. They made a big mistake. And I started to write down the date, the time, the name of the person I spoke to, and what we talked about. I wish I started doing this sooner. But as the problem kept progressing, I started sharing that information. I talked to this person on this day. This is what they said. I talked to this person on this day, and that's what they said. When the problems keep persisting, give this information back to them. If you don't have the documentation, you don't have an argument. So keep records of that. And I would say, don't just do this with NCARB. Do this with any regulatory agency. Every time I went and got a building permit, I wrote down the names and the dates, times, and names of the people I spoke to, and what did we talk about. Another piece of general advice for anyone that has to work with NCARB, I would say stop listening to NCARB's words and always focus on their actions. I'm talking to you ARE candidates, the state boards, the AIA, volunteers. There is a big difference in what they say versus what they actually do. We encourage diversity with our board of directors. There's a big difference between encouraging diversity versus actually having the diversity on their board of directors. So stop focusing on NCARB's words and focus on their actions. Yesterday, I was on the phone with someone and we were talking about everything, and I learned about a new word. I learned a new word. It's called brand splaining. It's like mansplaining, but it's brand splaining. It means when a brand explains something in a long, proper, and formal way, which always makes them sound good no matter what the situation is. These statements can easily be explained in fewer words. I've never met an organization that's been more guilty of brand splaining than NCARB. All right, my next, this is actually opinion. I think NCARB needs to hire a public relations person. The current communications department and customer service staff is not doing an adequate job of communicating with NCARB's stakeholders. So for many years, I worked in government as a project manager, as an owner's representative for the Bureau of Parks and Recreation. And we had a public relations person. And no one was allowed to engage with the public unless this person was aware of what was going on, because the PR person understood the priorities of all the stakeholders and all the special interest group. And she had relationships with them. And she would speak up, and she knew the repercussions of what would happen if we weren't sensitive to this group, what the repercussions would be with that group, or vice versa. I think NCARB needs an empathetic person who listens, who's socially savvy and is concerned about the future of architecture. A person who can bring some humanity to all the policies that NCARB throws around. All right, before I share my next opinion with you guys, I need to make a quick statement, and I want you to know that the lack of African American registered architects is collectively one of our as a profession, it's one of our biggest problems. It's a dumpster fire. I want to say that Black architecture licenses matter first and foremost. That's a problem. Having said that, I have another opinion. I'm worried that English as a second language people are not properly being represented in conversations around diversity, architectural licensing, and with studying and taking exams. And I think that the ESL is actually the largest minority group that I feel is the least organized or even acknowledged when it comes to testing and NCARB. I have a lot of experience working with English as a second language. I would say 70% of the people who take my ARE bootcamp program speak English as a second language. And here's my thoughts on it. I think speaking English as a second language is it's a disadvantage when it comes to taking the architect exam. It's definitely not a barrier. It will not stop you from getting licensed, but it doesn't help make things easier. And what I've learned with working with so many people is that they actually learn English as part of the process of studying for their exams. The ARE, studying for these tests, it actually has its own language that anyone can learn. It just takes persistence and it takes drive. It's definitely not a barrier. If English is your second language, you can definitely accomplish this goal, but you got to have persistence, you got to have drive, and you got to be willing to put in the time and do the work. And so I've repeatedly hammered on NCARB's poor communication in these videos, and people that speak English as a first language, we even have a hard time trying to understand what NCARB's trying to say. And so, this is happening in their communications. It's happening on the exam, the questions on the architect exam, and it's happening in their policies and the messaging of their brand. When we talk about diversity, please do not fail to acknowledge the enormous English as a second language community who is struggling to figure out what NCARB is saying with the rest of us. All right, my next item is I would love to see NCARB hire a diversity person whose sole focus is on broadening diversity across everything that NCARB touches and does. A person who's regularly talking and communicating with underrepresented communities and speaking for them when decisions are being made. I said it before, I'll say it again, I think the entire licensing system's broken. The chances of getting to that finish line are significantly lower for people of color, minorities, and English as a second language. I talked a little bit about it in my last video. I mentioned the ESA program. The process for foreign architects, people who are architects in other countries to get licensed in America, I think it's unnecessarily complicated, convoluted, and with efficiency on the back end, it doesn't need to be the way it is. All right, next thing is I think architecture is a profession that eats its young. And this is a message to all licensed architects and people who have completed the process. The arguments that you had working with NCARB when you went through this process, it's the same problems we're having today. Nothing's changing. We're not making progress. And I'll be honest with you, where the real problem is, and I can point the finger at NCARB as much as we want, but the real problem is when people are done with these exams and they get their licenses, they wash their hands of the process and they never want to look back, and they've never, they don't want anything to do about it. They don't want to even, have any part of this ever again. Thank God it's over. That hurts the next generation. It really hurts because, this was my inspiration for starting Young Architect all along. Is people, when I started the exams, I thought these things were easy. I thought it was going to take me 6 months. It didn't take 6 months. It took me 4.5 years. I failed 4 tests, and I spent over 2,000 hours studying to pass my exams. No one was helping anyone back then. And, there's not a lot we can do about NCARB, which is why I keep making these videos. But as, the people who have gone through this process, you need to support. You need to support the next generation. You have to help. We're never going to figure this out. And that was my inspiration for starting Young Architect. Is I said, if I could help, 1 or 2 people find success in their architecture careers, mission accomplished. That's like no one is helping. No one was helping. I saw the lack and I stepped up. And so please do what you can. Speak out. Support the people that are, going through this process. Support the people that are speaking out as we get there. All right, and the very last thing I want to mention in this video, and I want to wrap this video up and never make a video like this ever again about NCARB, is from my perspective, I think the ARE community and the Facebook group, the boot camp, and all of the people across America who are active within the ARE community, I'll be honest, I think it's the most united community I've ever seen. And I also think it's the most diverse community I've ever seen. What I find so inspiring about all of this, and where I pull my energy from to keep working with you guys and to do all these things, it's seeing people from all different, backgrounds and races and colors and religions and ages all coming together with a shared goal of excellence, of wanting to be successful in their career, and really taking the time to focus on, let's work together. Let's work together the same way we work together in offices and in architecture school, and let's just really focus on getting through these exams. And the support that I see people, that they have for each other, the compassion and the empathy, and that more than anything else, it inspires me. That's why here we are many years later since I started the silly Young Architect blog. I'm still involved, deeply involved at this point. seeing you guys and how, how well you guys work together, I've never seen a community like it. It's I'll be honest, it has nothing to do with age, color, race, religion. It's the shared vision of finding success in your architecture careers. And so let's keep focusing on that. That's my focus. My focus with all of this, it's not about helping people just pass a stupid exam. It's about creating better architects. And let's keep that as our core, our North Star as we move forward. And we're going to get there. We're going to get there way faster. And just keep doing what you're doing. So I'm glad, it seems like we're making progress, getting back. I don't want to make any more of these videos. I'm sick of talking about NCARB. I didn't want to get involved in the first place. I got other projects I'm working on, and this has chewed up a lot of my time. So thanks for listening if you made it this far. Good luck. Keep testing. Keep studying hard. I'll see you guys later. Take care. Bye.